brightly.
Operational experience alongside her risk management expertise. She is a well-respected speaker, presenter, and problem solver. Mary Beth, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and welcome to everybody. We're going to jump right into the material that we'd like to cover today. We have a lot that we want to cover, and thank you for joining us. Some of our learning objectives today, just as kind of to get us off and running, is that we want to talk about how we can assist you in defining your current risk culture, and obviously how we can move you forward in helping identify next steps. We also are going to spend some time today identifying trends and how to avoid those very high frequency claims that lead to claims of severity, which also impacts our financial viability. And then I'm going to talk about a concept that's called minding the gap. And this is a concept of how we can get our staff and employees to understand that when we have protocols or rules, how they match with our practices. So saying all that, we're going to jump right into understanding a little bit and getting a visual as to what is a risk process and what constitutes risk and how do we look at it. Many times when we think about risk, we think about it in a great big kind of cloud out there. And I'm hoping by taking this pie chart, it'll help you to understand as we look at risk and how we process it, that there are different pieces to the pie. And the first piece that we pull out is identification. So when we're talking about risk, we want to make sure that we are identifying risk and that we're identifying risk correctly. From there, we want to analyze it. Is it really a risk? Is it a high frequency? Is it severity? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few other slides. And then we need to strategize. What's the strategy? Because after all, risk is containable. We do have control around risk factors, and we're going to talk about that. And then implementation. What do? Who's involved in it? How does it affect our lives and in our communities that we manage? And then the ongoing, how do we modify and how do we monitor those changes? And this talks about sustainability. And I'm going to preface all this that we have said, and the importance is that we are trying to create a process that is 100%, that's always our goal, sustainable. So moving us along, risk process, we have, as we look at it, and you think about the community that you are involved in and things that have happened. I grabbed something that was very high profile. And so I put in my little quadrants here, worksite violence, because if that ever occurs in our communities, we know that that is a huge impact. Well, when something happens, one of the things that we want to be looking for, is it a frequency? Meaning, does it happen a lot? And then is it just a small happening, or is it huge? And then we look at severity. Is it something that happened that is very severe, that is impactful, that could impact our brand, it could impact our communities? And somewhere in this quadrant, we come up with what is the frequency and what is the severity, because that's going to impact what it is that we do going forward. Well, people ask me all the time, well, you know, I'm not sure I know what risks are, or how do I identify them? What are they? Well, I put some categories in here just to get you thinking. Operational risk, and that's typically what we want to talk about. We are going to have another webinar very shortly this month where we're going to get very specific into areas in our communities and talk about those actual risks. But under operational risk, we have a big umbrella. And part of that could be our supply chain. It could be products and product recall and how that impacts us operationally. Employee benefits are huge. And I might add that as we talk about risk culture and we talk about risk process, we tend to have two buckets. We have what's called general liability and we have workers' compensation. Employee benefits tend to go under the bucket that is workers' compensation. As we continue down the list, we hope we would never have to deal with kidnap and ransom, but that's certainly a concept that is part of our insurance and is part of our operational risk. And obviously, worksite violence, regulatory compliance is very large in what we do here. Employment practices, huge piece in what we do and how we do it. Corporate governance is another big one. Data breach with HIPAA and all the other regulations in our industry that we must deal with. And then, of course, employee safety. All this on any given day would give us thought as to why do we even want to go into work, because we have all of this that we have to think about. Well, the reality is operational risk can be managed once we understand loss frequency and loss severity. So going back to that chart that I had showed you a little while ago, as you look at all of those potential operational risks, we also understand that loss frequency is the how often. The loss severity is the amount. Now, here's the thing that I encourage everybody to remember, is that if you have loss frequency and you have a lot of frequency claims in your operation, at some point they're going to lead to loss severity. And once you have a major pop or a major loss that is classified as severe, it impacts not only your particular institution, but it also has capacity to impact the total community and the brand. So loss frequency and loss severity. Well, I get the question a lot that says, well, how do I know that? And so my question to you, too, is this information is through your incident reports and also through your loss runs that you receive from your insurance carrier. That's how you can track your trends as to what's happening in your particular community. So let me talk to you about a concept, and the concept is called minding the gap. Now, all of you have rules, you have regulations, you have those things that are in granite that we have to do, right? But we know on any given day for those to happen, and most times they're operated or they're controlled by people. And on any given day, we have lots that are going on in our facilities. And on any given day, anything can be askew. And so sometimes we have protocols out there and we say, yes, that's what we do. We do that all of the time. But in reality, we know that we have slippage. And there's times because maybe we are short-staffed, or maybe somebody's is late coming in, or we have a resident that has a particular need and has taken time away from other staff. We have practices. And the practices are what we actually do. The protocol is what we should do. So the more times we have slippage from what we need to be doing, that's our protocol, to what we have practicing, we call that a gap. And the more times we do that, the more times we deviate from the protocol into the practice, we create a crevice. It gets larger and larger. And then all of a sudden, we have a practice out there. And that practice does not relate back to the protocol. And that's what we call minding the gap. And that's where most incidences that lead to a claim, whether it be a claim of frequency or whether it leads to a severity, it's called minding the gap. Now, as you hear me talk about this, I hope that you're thinking about, let me think, where is it that maybe this has happened in our particular entity? Think about, has there been a time when there has been something that's happened, whether it's been minor or major, because we have slipped away from the protocol, from that we ought to be doing, that which we train to, but because of normal day-to-day things that happen, stuff happens all of the time, then we have deviated from that, and that is now the norm. I hope that makes sense to you. Because here's the statistic, and here's the reality. On any given day, 25,000 people are victims of a slip, trip, and fall. That's the number one cause of incidences for not only our residents, but I'm also suggesting the data shows that this is true for our employees. So we know that slip, trips, and falls are a frequent claim, and they also cause severity. So if we know that, think back to the start of our presentation, think back to the risk process. If you know that, think back how you analyze it, how you strategize it, who's involved in that, you implement it, and you monitor it. So here it is. Here's one great example. We know that a third of all Americans that are age 65 and above, we know that they fall. And we know that they're going to fall again. We know that it is a leading cause of fatal injury. And we also know that 2.5 million injuries are treated in emergency departments annually. Think about that. And out of those, there's a very large percentage that are fatal. But here's the statistic I want to share with you. In 2013, the total cost for fall injuries was $34 billion. Now, if we have capacity to control that, not only should we do it, but we have the means to do it. And the other piece of it, because of our mission of serving the people that we do serve, it's about doing what's right. So the financial toll for older adults is going to increase because our population is increasing. And if this multiplies out correctly without entities such that we manage, by 2020, that could be over $67 billion. That's huge, folks. And we have the capacity to make sure that that doesn't happen. Let me also show you this by leading causes of non-fatal injury. And you can see it goes from less than 1 year clear up to all ages, but we do have 65 plus. Now, again, very clear, across the board, even if you were talking from youth clear up to the ages that we deal with, unintentional falls is the number one cause of injury. Wow. And then we have unintentional struck by or against. Now, sometimes in that capacity, that could be falling against a wall, hitting your head. It could be anything like that. Unintentional overexertion. And then the fourth one is unintentional motor vehicle as an occupant. Thinking about what are our vehicles that we use to transport our population to the store, to the grocery store, to the theater, or whatever. And we're going to talk a little bit that in more detail in our second webinar. And then the other one is unintentional cut or a piercing of the skin. But it comes back again to slip, trips, and falls for our residents and also for our employees, which gives us great opportunities to impact this. So I created this other kind of a visual for us to look at, because as we look at safety for our residents and our employees, we need to take a look at what do we do as management for our management controls, and how is it that we control the behavior, how is it that we train to those controls, and how is it that we do our incident reporting. So as we look at the slide, we understand that we have to have management controls, but we also have to have behavior controls. And then many times those are your policies and your procedures, and we always train to those. And then when the misfortune happens, we need to immediately provide accurate and timely incident reporting. The senior you folks that are in senior living, I don't have to tell you this. You're under pressure. You need to mitigate all your risk, because reducing losses saves you not only time, but it also provides the quality to our residents. So how do we develop then a culture that totally supports a process of risk management? So first of all, what is your organization's risk culture? I might share with you some of the learnings that I've had over the years. And my learnings have been that not only what I thought our risk culture was not necessarily how it was defined by others. So think about, if you have a piece of paper there, what is your organization's risk culture? Think about that. Kind of put down a couple of words. So in developing broad-based culture around risk, we talk about having engaged and trained staff who have been empowered. Now, many times as supervisors and executive directors and managers, whatever the titles are, we sit and we say, of course we empower our staff. Of course we do. We give them the tools. We want them to be right there. But how is it that we truly implement and give our staff the tools to empower them to make a difference? And do we track and do we train consistently? Meaning, do we look at our data? We always say data is knowledge. Do we look at that? Do we see what story it tells? Do we track it? And then do we communicate? Do we communicate with our internal community and our external community as to what we learn? And those satisfaction surveys are not to be blameful tools. They are to be tools that guide us and help us with continuing to build a culture. You know, culture doesn't happen overnight. And it's not something that we come to work on Monday morning and we say, okay, I'm going to change the culture. Culture is about we. And culture is about totally understanding how people behave. So in doing that, when we look at culture from a resident viewpoint, we want them to feel safe in this environment. This is why they're there. We want them to feel safe and comfortable. And we want them to have an opportunity to share in what they want to see happens in their community to keep it safe. They're great resources. They understand on a daily basis what they're thinking and feeling. And we need to make sure that we have appropriate systems. But if you're going to do a survey, you need to expect that you need to report out, and we know that not all things on a survey can we implement. Some things are reasonable, other things aren't. But we need to share the results, and we need to say, yeah, this is part of our plan, or it's a short-term or long-term. And then we need to continually build off of what we've learned, and we have to reassess all of the time. Now, let's just do a little poll here, and let me just ask you this question. How engaged do you feel your employees are in promoting and supporting a culture of risk awareness? I'm going to give you a couple seconds, kind of pick your best choice, and then we'll go right into the results. Give you just a couple seconds here. All right, that should be good. So let's see if we have any results. And it's very much of what I would expect to say. It does. It varies by departments. And that's at about 66%. And that's something that we focused on, pretty honest. So that tells us that we have work that we can do, that we can be better than what we are. So saying that, your organizational culture is a process. It's not something that we just come up with on any given day. And it's not just how you perceive it, it's how, as a team, it's perceived. And culture, good culture, I don't want to say poor culture, but culture that needs to be worked on happens over a period of time. Organizational culture, and here's the best definition that I could share with you. But here's what I really believe. It's about values, and it's about beliefs, and it's about norms, and all of those are connected. And, you know, I'm asked a lot of the time, well, does culture start at the bottom? Is it worked up, or does it start at the top? Well, that's a great question. And that depends on your culture that exists today. I think that when you are working to change culture means that you're going to modify to some degree what your current beliefs are, what your values are, and you're going to move it into a different direction, means that you have to have everybody on board. And so your risk management program needs to be attuned to that culture, because those are the goals that have to be aligned together. And if that culture is not supportive of risk management, if your culture in risk management is really a check-a-box, then I would question the sustainability of being able to manage your risk and mitigate any kind of losses or future losses that might occur, because that's what we're talking about. I have entities and I have folks out there that say, you know, we haven't had anything. And I would say, God bless you. I think that's great. But what we're trying to work towards is to make sure that Murphy's Law doesn't happen. We don't want anything to happen to our staff. We don't want anything to happen to our residents. We don't want anything that is drastic that happens to our facilities. So saying that, when we talk about culture and we talk about risk, we're talking about planned work. Planned work takes less time than reactive work, because if we're only dealing from the reactive, we know that we have that snowball effect. And we want to make sure that, you know, we say time is money. Well, that's very true. But time takes away from our mission, from our values, all of those things that make us and what we do so essential for those people that depend on us. The benefits of having a risk management process, there's oodles of them. The first one, is reducing the actual losses and the lost opportunities that are there, and minimizing that cost of risk for an organization. Insurance costs are not going to go down. We're in a hard market. Insurance prices and costs are escalating. And so once upon a time, when I was very young in my career, I thought we just bought insurance and that was great and everything was taken care of. But the reality of it is that we have control. And insurance, to a lot of our entities, to a great deal, when you have insurance underwriters, they are looking at loss and your capacity for loss. But the other true benefit of a risk management process is creating peace of mind to all stakeholders. And by managing the risk, because you're keeping the organization safer for not only the employees, but for your residents, for anybody else who may come and go within your walls. And it allows the senior living community to remain in operation. We have to be there for our communities. And at the same time, we are saving money, and we have the capacity then to lower our insurance premiums. And so I think everybody would agree that that is certainly a goal. But everybody is sitting there, to some degree saying, how do I find the time and the staff to do this? And this is where it comes back to culture, because no one person can do and manage a process. We fondly say it takes a village. Well, it certainly does when we talk about risk management. It takes a village. So another poll question for you. Tell us, and you can check here as many as you want, and where do you struggle most in regards to risk management? This is going to kind of help me as I develop our next webinar into the various areas that we want to talk about. So I'm just going to give you a couple seconds here, and we'll skip here to the results and see what you're telling us. Well, one of it is, where do you struggle in training the staff? And I do want to spend some time talking a little bit about that. And communicating to the community, it has about 33%, training staff 66%, and preventative maintenance is 33%. I'm not surprised at this, because training the staff, we have staff that come and go. We have full-time and we have part-time. And to create sustainable training programs that are ongoing is very difficult. And so I relate to that, and we will continue to talk about and give you some tips with that as we move on. And one of the tips and one of the things that we're going to talk about is Work Hub. And as we talk about effective risk management programs, one of the tools is arming your team with the right tools to be able to communicate risk when they see it. Instead of trying to remember to have a piece of paper, instead of trying to remember to get someplace. So Erica Scott is with us. She's one of our apps engineers, and she's just going to spend a couple minutes and give you a brief demo about the Works Hub and how that gives you some visibility you need and how that can be helpful. Erica, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Mary Beth. Mary Beth has done a great job talking about all of the different components that tie into creating a strong culture of risk management and risk mitigation. You need strong management controls. You need behavioral controls. You need training, and you need incident reporting. Like she said, it really takes a team. But a challenge that a lot of us run into and that we're seeing from you guys on these surveys is that while it takes a village to create this type of culture, getting all of the different teams across the organization, across your community, to get on the same page in terms of training, in terms of how they report incidents, and in terms of how they respond to those incidences can really be a challenge. This is something that operational teams in particular run into, because I know in my experience, you've got housekeeping, you've got maintenance, you've got IT, you've got catering and transportation, and none of these teams are using the same systems. None of them have any strong way to communicate, and none of them have a good way to look up how to respond to these incidents that may be occurring. This is where a tool like the Works Hub comes in. It can be incredibly powerful to arm your teams with a tool that allows for that type of distribution of knowledge, storage of knowledge, and a way to communicate. The Works Hub is modular, right? So it can tie in not just maintenance, but housekeeping, IT, all of the teams really that you see on your screen. It can allow any of these teams to conduct surveys to ensure that you're getting good feedback from your residents. And it allows for reporting, both within each individual team and across teams. So let's take a look at how this works in the real world. One of the things that we want to ensure when we're talking about risk mitigation is that should there be an incident, that incident can be reported in real time and responded to in real time as well. Because this is a web-based application that you can give access to as many or as few people as you'd like, you're empowering your staff and in many cases your residents to be able to go to any computer, any smartphone, or any tablet to let you know when there is a concern that you need to be aware of. They can click into, for example, maintenance and let you know by entering in 3 fields worth of information where that concern is. Now the critical thing here is that they're using the same entry form for maintenance, for housekeeping, for IT, right? That keeps things simple for them, and it ensures that you're able to get that communication from them in real time and respond to it in real time. I'm mentioning real time. A big part of that is mobile. So all of our tools have a fully fleshed out mobile interface as well. This means that your technicians are saving time without having to go back to the shop to respond to requests that are submitted to the system. They can stay in the zone, so to speak, right? They can respond to these requests in real time from a mobile device. Now, keeping a culture of risk management, of risk mitigation, isn't just about being able to respond to things quickly. It's also about making sure that you've got strong policies and procedures for how we respond to this work and how we do the regular scheduled work, the preventive maintenance that keeps our facilities safe on a day-to-day basis. So a tool like this can help with that as well. I can load in scheduled work that needs to be completed, any kind of routine scheduled maintenance. I can load in task lists. I can load in things like meters that need to be checked every time. So when I'm doing hot water temp checks, for example, I can have my fields filled in on my work order. And this means that no matter how long I've been with the organization, with the CCRC or with the skilled nursing community, whatever it might be, I have the instructions that I need to do the job built into the system. The last part of this, you want to be able to leverage all of this information, right? So you can set up reporting that can allow you to look at the frequency of certain issues that you might see, to look at when you might have any kind of recurring issue, right? You can look at things like an asset history. And you also always have a log so that if there's a question about when a work order was entered, you've got an auditable reference. All of this comes together to help ensure speedy communication between the requester and the maintenance team. It helps ensure adequate documentation, whether you're dealing with liability concerns, reporting concerns, compliance concerns, and it helps you make sure that you've got some of those behavioral controls in place so that everybody on your team, regardless of tenure, knows what they need to do. So I'm going to turn things back over to Mary Beth, but I hope that gave you a good heads up on how a strong maintenance management system or operations management system really can help you achieve some of these goals almost passively, right? When you give people the right tool with the right resources, that goes a huge way towards creating the kind of culture that you're looking to create.
Thanks, Erica. That's very helpful. Appreciate hearing that. I hope that was helpful to everybody that was on. I'm going to move us back now, and I want to talk a little bit about some key things, and I want you to think about a checklist, and as we talk about culture, and do some mental checklists, because as we move forward into the next part, into our next webinar, we're going to talk about, as I indicated specifically, about areas in our facility as to quantitative risk management culture and whether we are attuned with our practices and our protocols. What are our best practices? So in getting ready for that, let's talk a little bit about our culture checklist. As we talk about it, do we think about that my organization that I manage, that I work in, emphasizes resident care among its primary initiatives? And how do we do that? And are we consistent? Are we able to be sustainable in that? Is the leadership in my organization, communicating the importance of the quality care to all staff. You know, I go back to our poll that says the training of staff and how important it is. My impression is that we have great senior community living opportunities, but we're only as good as the staff that we hire and that we train, and that we continue to recognize and work with. And again, does our organization invest with the sufficient resources to support the kinds of quality resident care? Because that's what we're hired to do. That's our mission. But it's also our brand, and that is what's being talked about out and about in our total bigger community. Does the organization provide regular updates on its quality and safety initiatives? You know, I heard you say, well, some departments are better than others. So let's ask the question, why is that? Where is the consistency or lack of consistency? We need to make sure that we have that among us. And my organization conducts regular quality risk reviews. Now, there are many ways to do what I call a gap analysis. There's many ways to review internally how we do that, from a basic checklist, but also to committees, also to ways that we communicate on a weekly, monthly basis so that we understand what's happening. Does our leadership place as much emphasis on managed resident events as achieving our company goals? Goals are important, and everything needs to align to the best of our abilities. Reporting resident events is expected and encouraged, and we need to understand what our residents need, what their involvement is, and that are we encouraging and doing the utmost to support that kind of culture. And that events are reported to those that need to know, who can help us influence change. Because here's the issue. We can't do it all by ourselves. We need to have many others involved if, in fact, we're going to be influential in what we're doing. And it takes all of us at all times to speak up about those things that potentially are unsafe and not be afraid. It isn't about, oh, if I report this, I'm going to go on somebody's list and then, eventually I'm going to be fired. No, it's not about that. It's about everybody working for the same purposes. The organization is proactive in reporting unsafe events to regulators. We talk about the secrets that we keep. The secrets that we keep will define our culture. And my sense is we will not define the culture that we want to aspire to be. We want to be, as much as possible, an open and transparent organization. And do we use the mechanisms that are around us for the complaints for unsafe reporting that need to happen? Do we allow our employees to have the feedback when an unsafe event happens? Do we report back? Do we share? Do we train? Do we collect the right data? And do we work it so that it tells a story? Data, once it's collected, is not put on a shelf. Data is there to help us be better. And so we need to use it appropriately. And it's not secret. It's not state secrets. And what do we do with those adverse events? Are they disclosed to residents and their families in a timely manner if by chance this happens? We know that we have protocols around privacy, but what is it that do we message out? Who does that messaging? How does that look? We know the importance of HIPAA. We know why it's there, and we always need to honor the confidentiality of that. we can't say enough about our employees. Our residents are the heart and soul of who we are there to serve. But our employees are our tools to be able to do what we need to do. And so we need to value them and the quality they bring and their safety. And we need to make sure that at all times, where possible, we're giving them a reward system, that we know what they're doing and what they provide to the organization. We talked again with one of the polls, investment in the development and training of staff is just so important. And training needs to be consistent. Training is done over and over. It's my opinion that we should never go into a meeting that we're not doing some type of training. Training does not need to be an hour. Training does not need to be an all day. We can take 5 minutes and 10 minutes out of any meeting or any gathering to revisit particular points of interest and training, to reestablish again to our staff what it is that we want them to do. Corrective report, we need to make sure that we have a reporting process to do what we need to do. I'm going to move us right along here. This is a little recap there, and I'm going to take us to our next slide here. In defining the last part of our culture, we want to make sure that investment is deep and broad, and that correctives are put in place at any point, at any time, and that we're doing ongoing follow-up at all times to improve whatever it is that we need to do. We know that employee reward systems are helpful, but they need to be used in the right way. So as you look at your culture, where do you stand? How do you look at risk culture? How do you look at your total culture in developing and creating a culture that you're proud of and that impacts the quality of service for your residents? This has been an opportunity for us to talk about risk, understanding a risk process and how we have control over it, and how it impacts a culture that impacts what we do on an hourly and daily basis in our communities and in our senior living centers. I hope this has been helpful to you. We've covered a lot of material in a very short period of time. In our next webinar, we're going to be talking particularly about areas in our facilities and where is it that we look for those risks and those best practices, and what are those corrective actions that we can take, and how is it that we use our culture to make those changes. Wendy now is going to ask for any of those burning questions that you have out there, because obviously we weren't able to answer everything. And I hope you have lots of questions for us. It's been so fun to spend this short period of time with you to talk about my favorite subject. And I want to hope that you received a couple nuggets of information from being with us. So Wendy, hopefully we have some questions out there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mary Beth. That was a great presentation. And Erica, thank you for showing us kind of what it looks like to utilize the Works Hub, in that manner. So one of our first questions we have is, what are some of the barriers to establishing that change in culture?
Well, one of the barriers that we have, number one, is time, is finding time in a busy schedule to, first of all, to identify what our barriers are, and then the time and the resources to begin to put together a plan that addresses them. But if this is important, and if leadership and staff feel that it is important to do these types of things, by starting with a survey, by starting with gathering information, by looking at the data that you already have on what's going on in your facility, gives you a starting point. You saw that big, huge pie. Don't chew up the whole pie at one time. Take one piece. Maybe take 5-10 minutes in a staff meeting and begin to have this conversation. And then have the conversation in all of your departments. Begin small, take small bites, and be inclusive is a great way to start the process and to help move the walls of barriers away.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, that's all the questions we have today. We really do appreciate your time today. And, please let us know if there's anything that we can do from the Works Hub standpoint. There's a little survey here if you'd like to get more information on the Works Hub. Again, thank you so much, Mary Beth. We've just had a great time hosting you today and look forward to the next webinar that we have coming up in 2 weeks. So we have part 2 on Tuesday, August 25th. Again, if you'd like to learn more information about the Works Hub, you can find us at theworkshub.com. Thanks so much, and we will be sending this recording to you. We hope you have a great day. Thank you.